People's SAARC for organizing this, and as my experience with SAARC over the last, I think 6-7 years, I'm quite impressed by the attendance at this event, because that shows the kind of mobilization that People's SAARC can effect. And so that's very heartening, and I'd also like to thank the IISc for making this possible. SAARC has come to mean much more than the formal mechanism which was set up 30 years back and which completes in December this year 3 decades. People's SAARC is a vital part of what is required to infuse greater dynamism to this formal body, as well as create a durable process of cooperative endeavors in South Asia. I think something to that effect Joint Secretary Ajay Gundani has also mentioned in his introduction. That such cooperative endeavors will be for mutual benefit is a foregone conclusion. People's SAARC can contribute to devising how to make it work, and work with an autonomous momentum. A momentum which will not be retarded or affected by the abilities or inabilities of headquarters of the governments that comprise SAARC. Because it so happens that this whole idea of SAARC came from people who felt that this whole region, after all, used to be a single economic space till the 60s. And what can be done to at least recreate that same socio-economic space? So that's how the whole process started in 1980s, first with the proposal by President Zia of Bangladesh, and then the discussions at the level of foreign secretaries, and then finally the summit in 85. So since it is the government decisions which had cut these links and divided the region into 7 or 8 sovereign governments, it compels us to work at the level of government to remove these or at least to liberalize these divisions without affecting the political arrangements. So SAARC perforce has to work with governments and with the official mechanism, because of these things like trade used to be free across the border, both on the west of India, north of India, and to Bangladesh till about 65. I mean, if you read the Hindu of last week, they bring us 50 years back, and they were talking of 10,000 tons of steel was at Chittagong port, was at the Calcutta port to be sent to Chittagong at that time for East Pakistan. But there were problems brewing between India and Pakistan and Kutch. So there were voices saying this steel should not go. But whatever happened after that, we all know. My point is to bring to your notice how these things were working even after partition for nearly 15-20 years. There were people from Pakistan who study in India, and there were connections. And with Nepal, which is the subject of our discussion today, this connection somehow or the other has remained intact throughout these years, because Nepal is so close, and the people-to-people connection in Nepal is totally unhindered. So there's free travel, there's no requirement of visa, and the bonding which is there between people in India and people in Nepal, if we are able to recreate this for the entire SAARC region, that would be a signal achievement. Now, enough has been said about what People's SAARC can gain by working together. Even though some people are still not convinced about working together in every area, it is because of 2 factors. One is that if you work together for mutual gains like trade and investment, or cooperation in economic spheres, people might say, okay, we are not interested in this, and some might have reservations, and they might feel that they are swamped by a bigger country. These are understandable, and we have to work slowly. But on the other hand, the present moment is one where we realize that there are compelling reasons for us to work together, and the most compelling reason is the common ecosystem. The same rivers, same mountain system, the same climate, which God has given us, and it is the challenges and the tyranny of this ecosystem which brings us together. And nothing could have proven it more forcefully than what happened in Nepal in the month of April. The earthquake was felt in Delhi. We were all, scared. We came out of our flats. But when we read the television, we found what happened in Nepal. Those of us who spent time in Nepal were moved to tears, because we had seen the Kathmandu and the valley, and how the Nepalese people had built it up. And I, having spent 3 years in Nepal, I've had a personal experience of the industry and the sincerity and the simplicity of the Nepalese people. I would give anything for them. They're the best in South Asia, because there's a lot of politics, there's a lot of hubris about what happens with the Maoists, what happens with the political system, what happens with the parliament and assembly and all. But if you go to the streets in Kathmandu, the society still is syncretic, their synthesis is strong, people work together, and their labor and their quality of output is first class. So when you hear this kind of a catastrophe, it breaks your heart. And that was the feeling most Indians felt about Nepal at that time. And after that, what has happened is, I think, my dear friend Kanakmani Dikshit is here, who would give us the more authentic account of it. But what I'd like to mention in this context is why SAARC could not do what it could do, and what are the problems. I would begin with problem of the national action in this regard. Like India, Prime Minister Modi immediately organized the whole disaster relief work, and he had a cabinet meetings, and cabinet secretary was asked, and things started moving very quickly. And he felt very strongly about it, and in his statements also it was quite evident that he, as he said, Nepal ki peeda hamari peeda hai. I mean, that kind of empathy and heart-to-heart connection was there. But even for India, for instance, we shudder to think, God forbid, if a similar thing happens in India, the helplessness will be the same. The reason is that the size of the problem is so big. To prepare, to have a risk assessment of disaster, to prepare for disaster relief, to have search and rescue and rehabilitation. This is a whole process which we have not actually come to grips with in a substantive way. In India, I started work on this after the tsunami. There has been the National Disaster Management Body, but as I just said, these things got activated in the present century. One of the problems which I find is that any of these things, you need redundancy. You have to create mechanisms which are ready. You have to create systems, you have to create people, you have to have equipments ready, you have to have computers and everything ready to go at a short notice. Somehow or the other, our poverty-stricken societies, even today, in this day and age, are not able to live with redundancies. You create a redundancy, very soon someone will say, "Abhi to nahi ho raha hai ji, isko yahan use kar do. It's not working now, why don't we use this? It is lying idle." Now that is the bane of any preparation for disaster relief, because you've got to prepare things and they should stay and they should work. You look at the US, for instance, which leads this. The New York fire in 1913 started the whole process, And I have visited in one of the US universities, in the A&M University in Texas. They have a 500-acre complex which does engineering solutions for disaster relief. So like when you go for earthquake victims, you just don't go with hands, because there you will be of no use. You must envisage what would have gone wrong there. You must have equipment, you must have sensors, you must have instruments to help people. So they have devised them, and they have done the models which actually help you understand these kind of activities. Now that kind of a thing is required for us in South Asia. And how can we do that? I used to be Secretary General till about 2011. And at that time also the UN agencies in Kathmandu used to talk, when we used to meet, about the impending earthquake which is waiting to happen in the Himalayan region, particularly in Nepal. But you cannot locate it at a particular region. So all of us actually were worried. And they kept saying that something should be done. So a lot of effort was done. The Nepalese government was sensitized to it, and they were doing their best. However, things like this, when they happen, you can't really ensure that immediate actions will be taken. The second thing which was felt, which is there, is that in the wake of an earthquake, as the saying goes, it's the buildings that kill, not the earthquakes. So what do we do with the buildings? And to reinforce these buildings. So we had in Kathmandu people coming from New Zealand, from Auckland, which had been through two successive earthquakes in the year 2010. And the man who was in charge, who was the mayor of Auckland, he had come. And he described in detail how he felt the earthquake, and his wife was sleeping downstairs, and he ran down, but by then his wife was under the rubble. So someone like New Zealand, for instance, people like that, they were prepared for that. In Japan, for instance, they are prepared for earthquake, and they have buildings which can shake but still survive. We, in our part of South Asia, we need to work together to get these things organized. So it is here that what is incumbent on us becomes, as Ajay mentioned, from government to people, because governments are not able to deal with this. Poverty alleviation, for instance, he mentioned that's a subject in SAARC. But within each country, and not only India, but even Nepal or even Maldives, poverty alleviation, governments are grappling with it. It's not easy, it takes time. So earthquake or disaster relief is something for which we need express attention, for which we need special earmarking of equipment, forces, funds, human resources, and readiness, and a drill for that. The SAARC agreement on disaster relief, I was involved in its preparatory stages, but it's at best a best endeavor, intention. There's nothing in it which is binding, because the states in SAARC, because of political reasons, are so jealous of their sovereignty. It's like a child, if you give a child first time a car which moves on its own, as soon as it moves, he captures it. He doesn't allow it to move, because the child doesn't like things moving on its own. Now, something like that is there in our governments in South Asia. You create a system and they go and control it. They don't want it to move. So SAARC Disaster Management Center, I was deeply involved with that, because there was a very able officer, Thar Chakravarti, who was the first head of this. He was from the IAS, from Jammu and Kashmir cadre, a very dedicated man. And he did a lot to prepare the mechanism and connecting with the UN organizations and the funds, so that we could get things ready. But when it came to accepting the mechanism which he worked out, we were stumbling on the familiar blocks. How will visa be given? We cannot be assured about it. How will people move? These basic problems. And that was the year 2010, and it is 2015. 5 years have gone. We are still not quite there with the mechanism. And the reason for that is, again, as I mentioned, there's a whiff of this. Nepal, when it went to earthquake, I particularly, if they're asking me in television, I said, look, we must remember Mahatma Gandhi's dictum that par dukhe upkar kare, man abhiman na mane. If you're helping someone, then don't feel proud. You got to feel the pain of the other guy. But our system was 50% worried. We are the first to go. What first to go? What can you do? That there the sky has broken. And even all your energy and resources cannot give them relief. So be humble about it. But that business about spardha, competition in South Asia is, so unproductive. It is the root of zero sum. If we are going, we should feel that, okay, let's go and do this. And I'm telling you this because this is a people's SAARC. I'm not talking as a government official. We have in our society, in our history, in our culture, the spirit to do so. The Pakistani ambassador and I in Nepal were great friends. And Ahmad Faraz, the great Pakistani poet, he passed away. So I said, we must do something for him. So we had organized a meeting, they had organized a meeting in Pakistani embassy. And he was talking about Farhad. And he knew him. In Peshawar, they lived in the same locality. And the incident which he reported, I want to mention this because this is the core of all our beings. He said, Farhad Sahib used to live there and he had the car in that locality. And if anyone felt ill, suddenly in the middle of the night, we used to go to him and he used to come with the car, take the people, take the person who's affected. Now that was done totally unobtrusively. But that's how our ancestors have given us the culture. That if somebody is in trouble, run to it and do it without making a fuss about it. That's the very important point which I feel that Nepal earthquake has taught us. That Indians who went there should have gone there in greater numbers, but with greater humility. They should have, and then you are not different from them. If you go to Nepal and an American goes to Nepal, your ability is far-reaching because you can understand their language, the people understand you, you can go much further. When someone comes with a different language from a different country, he has a problem understanding what is the pain there. So we must see what our commonalities are and we must harness these commonalities. And in this respect, the People's SAARC is the kind of a body which can push this. Governments are too straight-jacketed. And they have procedures and processes and agreements and meetings and meetings and meetings. Whereas here at the level of people, things can be done much better. So I thought that I must bring this element to your notice. And I'd like to, give me a minute. And the other thing is this SDMC. This center which has been created is one of the better centers of SAARC. There have been several regional centers. Some of them have been decided to be closed down after the Nepal summit in November. But SDMC is a good center. And it needs to be magnified at least tenfold. And it needs to be linked up with the global organizations which are involved in disaster relief. And it needs to be connected with the governments of SAARC in a more direct manner. If you read the SAARC agreement, it says action will be taken by Secretary General. They could have actually given the mandate to SAARC Disaster Management Center. But there are these other undercurrents also. So they say, well, center is based in Delhi, so Secretary General should do that. Now you can imagine Secretary General sits in Kathmandu, he has to connect with the SDMC, then SDMC has to act, and then they act with the consent of the governments. So they have to first seek consent of the government. So where is action possible? By then, the immediate rescue will be, the time will be past. So that's the reason why, bilateral requests and bilateral processes are far more prompt. And people went to Nepal bilaterally. Bangladesh, India, Bhutan, Nepal, Pakistan, Sri Lanka. They all went bilaterally because that way it is much faster. The point was made that SAARC Food Bank, for instance, SAARC Food Bank is ready and it is ready to provide food, but bilateral processes are much faster. So if they need it, they know where to tap and it can be done. There is SAARC Development Fund, which has $300 million plus waiting there. They should at least make special meeting and earmark $100 million to Nepal, because this disaster is unprecedented. And immediately they are talking about the UN agencies giving assistance to Nepal, but we have a fund sitting there, and that fund should be activated because this is an extraordinary situation, this is emergency, and at least as much they could give for Nepal, it should be made available. And if the rules need to be changed, they should be done. If the charter needs to be revised, it should be done. The point is that we have within our means to do these things, but we got to remove the shackles. And these shackles are totally unnatural. And we should listen to our heart and our culture and our spirit. I thought, if I am talking too much, please forgive me, but I feel from my heart, this is how we should do. Thank you.